Hey guys, it's Eldon back here. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Dad's Garage. Today we're going to be doing some more fun stuff rather than just the old repair videos. So we're going to be working on the 71 GMC truck. All right, let me flip the camera around. Well, I'll just go on here for a second. So, as usual, I get carried away with things and I dove into this project and I got halfway through it and went, oops, I was going to make a video of that. Fortunately, I just worked on one side at a time. So what I'm doing right now, we did put the lowering kit on it a while back, and I decided I definitely needed the C-notch kit in the frame to get me the clearance that I need. So I'm putting those C-notch adapters in there where you cut out a notch in the frame, and then you can bolt these things on. I'm actually welding them on, but I'm going to show you how we go about doing this. It's pretty simple. What I'm finding is I picked up some Chinese parts to do it with, just way cheaper, and for me they work because I got the fab skills for it. I'm going to show you how I use those parts because they don't come with any instructions. And so if you're somebody that needs instructions for something like that, you're probably going to be a little bit confused at them. So I'm going to walk you through how I put these on. And I did weld them, but I'm going to explain to you, where you need to bolt them and those kind of things so that you can get this done. So let's get it flipped around here, and we'll start with the side that I already did and move around and start the process. So hey, I just got this project done here and decided, you know what, I need to make another clip of a video and throw it in here. So we're sitting here. I want to talk about a couple things that I learned from this process. So right there you can see the finished product. So a lot of guys are going to go, okay, so why did you use the cheap Chinese parts? And I got a couple reasons. First of all, because I'm on a budget, tight budget, and if I don't use that kind of stuff, I don't get to play with my truck. Okay, and that's neither here nor there, but I just want to let you know that you can use those parts, which seem cheap and maybe they're not exactly what you would prefer to have, but you can use them. Basically, this bracket, this pair of brackets here, I got them for not much more than the cost of the metal when you really stop and look at it. There's some fabrication done. It's not perfect. You're going to see that these curves right here do not exactly match my frame, but I'm okay because I'm fabricating stuff. I can weld all day long and make the things work out, and they turned out perfectly functional. The other thing that I talk about probably later on in the video is I've welded these in place. That's very easy to, not very easy. The other alternative is to bolt them in place because they come with bolt holes and that thing, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. If you want to do that, you're just going to have to drill holes where I welded stuff. The holes are already in the brackets. You just got to drill them on through the frame itself and get the thing bolted in place. I just prefer welding. I think it gives me a stronger product when I'm done with it. So I just wanted to throw those things in here. Do not be afraid of these parts unless you don't have fabricating skills. Then it's different. If you got some money to throw at the nice made in America parts, they'll probably fit better than these and maybe be easier to use. I don't know, haven't used them, but they seem like they're a little bit better made parts. But for what I'm doing, I would have had to go out and find the metal anyway. I would have had to figure out how to bend it. I would have figured out how to cut the notches and all of that stuff. But by buying that cheap part, that saved me from that part of the fab project and actually probably cut my time I got into this thing by 2/3. So probably only took me 1/3 as much time to do this as it would have if I was making my own parts here. Or yeah, if I had some better parts, it would have worked out smoother. Anyway, I want to throw that in here. Now let's jump into going ahead and moving forward with the process of actually putting them in place. All right, here we go. Let's start with the obvious things. I've got the bed off. Now you could nah, you really couldn't effectively do this with the bed on, because unless you're just going to bolt them. If you're going to bolt them, you could probably bolt them on with the bed in place. But because I'm welding them, I've got a big bead that has to be run along the top of it right here. And that bead, I don't think you could get to it with the bed on, because the bed sits right there and it just wouldn't work. So anyway, there's the first one. I've got it in place. It was a learning experience for me as much as anything to be able to show you how to do it on here. And you can see how carried away I got. I actually made the notch in there already on the other side. But, so I've got my frame up on jack stands, supported right there. That carries the weight of the truck and everything. When you take out that big of a notch here, I'm a little bit concerned that the weight of the frame could cause that to move, and I didn't want that to happen. So I came back here and I've got the back of the frame supported now so that it can't sag on me when I make those cuts in there. So yeah, again, that's a great high-tech jack stand, but it'll work. So there we go. I've got it notched out. Let me show you how I arrived at getting that notch in the right spot. All right, first thing I did, take my notch bracket here over to the workbench. And what I did was took myself an old folder, and I cut it up, and then I taped that thing together to where it matched the notch that I was going to need to make in there. Then I was able to take this over to the frame. Well, let's see, I did a couple things. Actually, I'm going to stop here and come back in just a second. Okay, by bringing my bracket over here, this thing could be more accurately located than it actually is with the way things came. There are on the bottom, these two holes here actually are designed. So you see those two rivets holding that bracket there? They only have them on the driver's side, not on the passenger side, because they put them over here behind the cross member on this side. Yeah, there you can see them. So they should, those two holes on the other side should have lined up with those rivets, so you could cut those rivets out and bolt there. I found out that they didn't line up perfectly, and that's one of the reasons that I'm welding it. But you could still get those rivets cut out and mark your holes here and drill those holes in the frame exactly where you needed them to be, and then your bolts and everything would hold that cross member in place just fine. There is another hole right there that let's see if it's got it on this side. Yeah, so right here on this side, on the upper shock mount is right here, and that bracket sits on top of the frame right in this area, and there is this hole right there that on this side had a bolt in it. On the other side over there, it had a rivet, and that hole theoretically should line up with this hole, but I found that it didn't, and so that's why I've another thing that contributes to the welding thing. It's, again, you could drill that hole out and take your rivet out and make that match and bolt the thing in place. You could have done that, but it just wasn't. And I think it's part of these things being Chinese made and everything, that they're not perfect. So what I did, because I wanted to establish, see that yellow mark right there? I wanted to establish where the front of this bracket should be. So what I did is I held the thing up so that, my hand's gonna be in the way here. I wanted the notch centered over my axle. And that was one of the reasons, if I would have centered it on those bolt holes, it would have actually moved it a little bit too much one way or the other and not had it centered. So what I did is I held that notch right there up against the bottom of my frame rail, and then I slid it forwards and backwards until I had it lined up where I wanted, and that then is what showed me where to make that mark there. and I'm not 100% sure. I believe that's where it's supposed to go. Yeah, that looks right. So I made that notch. Then I was able to take my paper template right here and put it on there, lined up with that mark that I made right there. And now this takes the place of my metal bracket so that I could mark out where to make that cut. So I got that on there, got my mark on there, and then I cut to the outside of that cut maybe 1/8 of an inch, because I wanted to be able to make sure that bracket went all the way in there the first time, and I wasn't have to finesse that cut, because it's not going to matter when I get this all welded and bolted together. There's so much strength in that bracket that having a little bit of gap right here isn't going to change anything. So I did that, got my cuts made here. Then you don't have a good way to mark these cuts, so what I did was took them, or tried to take them, at a 90-degree angle to the front and back of the frame here, and that, when I cut those straight across there, got that notch out of there, now bingo, my bracket fits into place like it's supposed to. I've got it up there, and my next thing then is going to be to get it clamped into place. And now you can see I'm not perfectly lined up with my line, but it is exactly where I want it to go. So yeah, I'm not Mr. Perfect on this, but that's where we're at to this point. Another thing I've got is, when I get that in place, this is hanging over the side of the frame, the bottom of that bracket, more than it should be. So I'm going to end up, once I get this clamped in place, I'm going to make a line across here and cut that excess material off so that I can have a good flush weld there. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get some clamps, and we're going to clamp this thing into place and show you where we're going to go from that point. Okay, a couple things I forgot to mention here. On that side, you've got the wires to the tail lights and stuff run through there. So you need to get them out of the way. I had to go through that hole right there. I pulled them clear out so they wouldn't be in the way of my welding. Yeah, obviously you want to protect those, especially if they're good ones. Pretty well done with those at that time. On the other side, I've got the brake line that it actually came up through here and had, so it's got two clamps. There's one here and one back under there that had it bolted in place. So I untook that front clamp and then bent that line back out of my way there, because I didn't want to cut through it. Not that, I mean, this is an old rusty one, I'm going to replace it, but you want to be careful with that so that you don't have to replace your brake line if it's any good. You can actually just unbolt it and get it pulled out of the way in there. All right, to get my bracket in place, used a couple of spring clamps just to hold it to start with, but then I got my C clamps in and clamped it down good and tight to the frame. And so this is kind of the manufacturing flaw that probably comes because it wasn't made by people with great skill, but I can deal with that. On the other side, I just filled that weld in ultimately, just so I kept water from going down that way. But I like the way I've got my fitment now. If you look at it there, it's sitting straight above the axle, which is where I need it to be. I'm not perfectly lined up with my line. Again, I don't know how that happened, and I really don't care as long as it got me this result here. So now what I need to do, I've got all of this frame freshly painted, and I need to get rid of that paint where I'm going to be welding, because weld and paint don't work together. All right, I'm also need to get the rust off from underneath the paint because I didn't get it perfectly done. So I'm going to take a scratch awl here, and I'm going to mark now exactly where that thing is going to be hitting my frame. So it's going to be coming out here along the front. I'm also going to mark along here where I want this cut off, so I know how much of that to cut off. to be able to make a nicer weld there. Let's see. Obviously, we're gonna come across the top here. Not that I really need to know where that's gonna be, but I just want you to see this principle that by getting those things scratched in there, now I'd be able to go underneath and make sure that I get all those spots ground clean from the paint and the rust, so that it will weld up good. Yeah. So this one doesn't just go straight across. It has an angle across the back, so I'm going to make sure I do that. On the inside here, we got a good enough match, so I'm probably just going to clean the paint or the powder coating off the back of that bracket, and then be able to get that cleaned up. Anyway, that's probably not very good cinematography, but you'll get the picture. Okay, so now at this point then I'm gonna unclamp all that, and I'm gonna go over and I'm going to clean the frame up, plus I'm also going to grind all of this powder coating off of the places that I've got to weld on the bracket itself, because powder coating is even worse than paint for trying to weld through. So that is what I will do next, and I will be back at that point to then start tacking it in place. Okay, I got my bracket all prepped now. Did a couple of main things here. This is where I cut that extra piece off because it was shaped wrong. So got that cut off. Then I went all around the edges where I knew I was going to have to weld, and I've ground the powder coating off of those surfaces so that I should be able to weld nice and easy there. Then I'm going to plug weld all of these holes, meaning I'm going to go in there and start welding to my frame and come back and fill that up and weld to this. That was nice. I'm going to go in there, start welding to my frame, and work my way back out until I fill this hole up. And that's going to weld the bracket to the frame at that point and fill the hole. These are normally where you would have your bolts, but that's out of disgust. I'm going to weld them. So because I was going to do that, I needed the powder coating cleaned out from down inside of that old drill hole. So what I did is I took my drill bits and I found the hole that was the correct size for that. And then I went up one size in drill bit and went through and re-drilled those holes, and that took all that powder coating out. Same thing on this one, because I'm going to want to weld there. And this one right here is the one hole you don't want to damage, because that's where your bump stop's going to bolt to later. So you want to leave that one alone. But I've got these two here, those two there, this one, and then my two front and back on my sides of where the frame's going to bolt to. So that now is all prepped and ready to go. Next I got to get the frame prepped. All right, now here you can see I got the frame all ground off and prepped any place I'm going to be welding. So I'm welding to clean metal, including my plug welds and my holes. Got all underneath done, clear out to here where the bracket comes to. All the way around inside here, up and around the opening itself, so that I can weld it to the bracket everywhere that I need to. So that's all ready to go. Now the next step is to get the bracket clamped back in place, and we will be ready to start burning it in. Well, here we go. We got her clamped into place now. Let me talk a little bit about that to start with. So, funny as it sounds, clamping matters, how you go about doing it. So we know that this bracket did not accurately duplicate the channels of the frame and fit it perfectly. And like I said, I'm okay with that. So what I did, my first thing I'm going to want to do is get this tacked here and here and here and here. And so what I want is for this plate right here to be tight to the frame there. I want this plate to be tight to the frame here so that I've got a good joint there and a good joint here. And then I want to pull it up with this clamp because I had about a 1/4 of an inch gap right here. And that is because this thing needed to flex down that way in order to fit the frame better. So I used that clamp to pull that up tight there. And then I came back here and used this clamp to pull it up tight back here. And with those clamps in that position, now I can go get this thing all tack welded in place good. And it should be really right where I need it to go. It's a possibility. On the other side, I wasn't fitting tight here, so after I got it tacked back in this area, I had to come up here, put the clamp on up here, and draw those tight together and then clamp it, but I'm not going to have to do that on this side. Back here, I've still got a little bit of a gap right here. Can you see that where I'm at? Yeah. So once I get it tacked back at the back and around on the sides and stuff, I'm going to come put my clamp right here before I tack that in place. And that should get me all tightened up where I need to go here. You look down here and I don't know, I might want to come in here and pull that top back over after I get the bottom tacked. I'll have to think about that. But right here is not bad. We're up against the frame good. We're going to have that big gap there to fill, but that's to be expected from what I did on the other side. This is going to be okay here. It's tight here, tight there. That just means we're going to have to fill this, which is okay. There's going to be tons of weld on this thing. It's going to be way stronger than it needs to be in the welding department. So I'm just going to take that approach to it, and we should be in good shape. So I'm going to bring the welder over here. We'll get some tacks on it, and I'll kind of show you where we're at that point, whether I do decide to come in here and put that clamp on this or not. I don't know. Maybe here I might do that. We'll just see. All right, I will be back at that point. Okay, you can see that I've got all my big tack welds in place. So when I say tack welds, I'm not talking about little tiny ones. I'm talking about big heavy ones, because to pull this bracket into alignment with the frame, I want something that's going to be strong enough to hold it once I do take these clamps off. So that's going to be my next thing here, is get the clamps off and then start finish welding this thing back up. I moved this clamp here, which allowed me to tighten up that gap right there a little bit. I did move that one. I don't know that it did much, but made me feel good about it anyway. So that's where I'm at. Now I'm going to pull those clamps off and fill that weld in all the way around the thing, and that's going to take me an hour or two to do that much welding. I'm going to show you something here. Now, I'm not like I'm the world's greatest instructor at this. I've learned I can run a really pretty bead in somewhere, but I've learned that it's more important, especially on something like this, that I build a strong weld instead of a pretty weld. I will go back and sand these off and touch them up and things like that. Yes, there are guys who are talented who can build a strong pretty weld, but I'm not that guy. But I want to show you one trick I've learned here to get a good strong weld on things like this. And I'm using a wire feed, so obviously that's what we're going to do. But what you want to do, let's get in here. You want to take your weld and pretend that this is running, and I'm going to start and I'm going to weld across this piece of the bracket here and then into there and out here a little bit, and then I'm going to move up and go back down into the hole and back out, and I'm going to zigzag my way in here. And while I'm doing that, I'm watching where the tip of that's touching so that I'm sure that this metal is melting when I'm welding on it, because that's how you know that you're going to stick to it, as if it's melting a significant puddle of metal there as you're weaving it back and forth through there. And if you do that, you're going to have a very strong weld. Anytime you're weaving across a weld, it's probably not going to look super pretty, but the critical thing is that you get both of those sides tied sturdily together. And so that's just a short welding lesson. Somebody may contradict me, and that's okay. There's probably different ways to do this, and some guys are more professional and better artists than I am. But I just want you to know that's something that I've learned over years and years and years of welding amateur. All right, I'm gonna pull my clamps off and go back to welding here, and we'll show you what it looks like when I get basically finished with it. Well, there we go. We got a bunch of the welding done. I'm running out of daylight and just ran out of welding gas, so I got to go restock on that before I do it. But I've got it welded a huge part of the way around. Got my plug welds done on the sides. I got a lot of the inside done. Still have to do little bits and pieces, but it's looking pretty good. When I get back, I'm going to show you how I go about filling that. A lot of you probably know, but just one of those little tricks of the trade that we want to do. And so yeah, I'll be back when I get some welding gas and get another day here. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. So one of the things that you got to realize here, so this is a section where I am not putting this weld in here for strength very much. The one thing I will gain is I won't get any flex, because I will tie this to that. It'll eliminate any flex that might happen in that steel or even in this by tying them together. So the bigger thing is I'm just trying to fill this gap up right here so I don't get water and dirt that settles down in there and causes rust later on. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my welder and I'm going to run a bead along there, all the way along here in place where I've got a gap. And I'm going to try to make that bead kind of as thick as I can so I can gain space in there. And then I'll come back and I'll put a second one in there, maybe even come and put one on here in spots, just so I can get them to where they're all kind of close together like this. And at that point, then I will come back in and start doing my weaving weld across the whole thing to tie it together. So I'll show you as I get those individual beads put in there. Okay, there, I've got my first one laid in there, and you can see I'm trying to get that gap filled up. And as I come along, each succeeding weld will not have to be the full length. It'll just come whatever it takes to fill the gap so that I can have something to weld to when I put the final weld on. Okay, there you can see more what I'm talking about. I've got that gap all filled in. Now, none of this weld is intended for strength. This is all intended as a backer for my final weld, which is what's going to actually weld those two together and gain the strength that we're after. So now I'm going to start in, and I'll just start working, weaving that whole weld in along there so it looks more like this one here. That's my next big step. Oh, there we go. Now you can see we got ourselves a nice weld that's bridging that gap. It's got it all filled up and all tied together, and that should be oodles and gobs strong for what we're trying to do here. Now I just got to finish up all the other welding. I got some stuff to do up underneath and on the inside of the rails and things like that. So I'll get that all finished up, and then our next step will be to start grinding those welds smooth. All right, we got both sides completely welded in there, and it is all tied in and ready to go. That's going to be a super strong modification there. Other side, I've finished all those welds up. So now my next thing is I want to come in and I'm going to grind this off, kind of pretty it up a little bit, and then we'll spray a coat of paint on it and be done. And that'll be the end of this modification. It's worked out actually quite well. So I'll just move along there. I'll get it ground off and smoothed up and come back and we'll be ready to go. All right, there we have it. Got her all welded up, grounded down, all back together. And you know, could it be better? Yep, it could. But for what I'm doing on this truck, which is not a show truck, I just wanted something that runs and works well. This is going to turn out really nice. So I got all the grinding done on it to where it looks like it needs to, and then the other side I actually painted last night. I primed it actually. I'll get some more satin black sprayed on it today, but that's what we're gonna have when we're all done, and it will be very effective at what I needed it to do. So that's how you go about installing one of these, at least if you're going to weld it. Obviously, if you're going to bolt it, you're going to have to drill some holes and bolt the whole thing together. And you can do that. There is nothing wrong with that. This just works better for my particular application. So I'm going to wrap up the video here. I don't know that there's anything else I need to tell you about. Oh, here we go. There's one thing. So I did go back in there because we took the rivet out and the bolt actually on that side. I decided to weld those back to the frame there to stabilize that shock mount. It's not going to need a ton of stuff to do that, but I did it. Ran a bead around this one. This one actually had a rivet in it, which the top part of the rivet's still there, but we ground the head off the bottom, so we need to fix that. And also right there on this cross member, these two rivets, we ground the heads off the bottom of them for that to fit. So I just ran myself a bead across here, as well as they are plug welded on the bottom, which is going to probably catch that rivet anyway, but just to be sure, I put those in there. So there we go. Well, next step in moving along and getting this truck lowered where I want it to go. I do believe that, judging by the looks of things here, I'm going to need to cut this bracket off the axle because it's going to want to hit there, I'm pretty sure, before we hit the bump stops up here. But I will play with that a little bit more after I get the thing set back down on its wheels. So that should wrap us up here. I mean, obviously you're going to need to move your brake lines if you've got good brake lines and things like that, and get them up over the rail. You're going to need to get your wiring put back in place here and tied in. I obviously still have some work to do on those things. I think that would wrap up the details though for taking care of the C-notches. So we will sign off here. I think what you can look for on the next video is I've got some extension brackets for the lower shock mounts on the axle that will extend those down 4 or 5 inches, which will allow us to use a stock shock absorber on this thing. So because this truck's a little bit unique, have a leaf spring rear axle instead of the trailing arms that most of the trucks had. They didn't make a part specifically for this, so I had to get one from a later square body and modify it. So we'll go through that process on the next video. But for now, everybody have a fun time, enjoy yourselves. And hopefully your projects move along a little faster than mine, but hopefully this is something that's useful to you. Talk to you soon. Bye.